One fact about every character in Fire Emblem Three Houses. Well, almost every character. I'm sorry, Costas bros, nothing interesting came up. Anyway, we're gonna go alphabetically through the factions of the game, meaning we start with the Black Eagles and their glorious leader, Edelgard. Although, if you're playing the Blue Lions route, she is far from glorious and more of a great evil and even the final boss, which makes Edelgard the only final boss in the entire series to ever be playable in the same story. Takumi is close, as he's playable in both Birthright and Revelation, but he is only the final boss in Conquest. Edelgard is the final boss of the Blue Lions path, but she is also playable in the same story, in the tutorial level before you've even chosen your house. Her retainer Hubert may honestly be one of the most shady looking playable characters in the entire series, but as one of the Counselor box notes reveals, he actually dreamt of being a Pegasus Knight. Maybe the crushing realization that only women can do so is what caused him to be so gloomy, huh? Next, Bernadetta's special S-Support artwork was actually changed throughout the game's lifetime. In the original version of the game, her earrings are slightly incorrect, which was later changed with the 1.1 patch. The difference is minimal honestly, whoever noticed it definitely has a good eye. Another S-Support fact for all you Byleths out there who didn't give their ring to Linhardt: his artwork is unique in the fact that it chose him on a field of grass instead of the familiar balcony. Maybe he was too lazy to climb the stairs? Would fit his character. A fun little fact about Dorothea is something we only know thanks to the online stats feature that pops up during loading screens. She has throughout the lifetime of the game almost always held the position of most deployed unit in the game. Not sure if we can conclude she's the most popular character of the game based on that, but it's at least suggesting people like recruiting her into other houses at least. Another Counselor note fact coming up, this time about Ferdinand. It is revealed his glorious post-time skip hair is not a fashion choice, despite many of his friends thinking so. It's simply the result of the stress of the war having led to him forgetting to cut it. Then there's Petra, Princess of Brigid, which means she is the only character of royalty in Three Houses that does not have a crest. A Brigid Queen, but a Fodlan commoner. Onto the brawler of the group, Caspar. In fact, he is the only character in the entire game who requires brawling proficiency to recruit to your house. And finally, don't forget, she is a Black Eagle as well, Monica von Ox. Despite being from the prior year of Black Eagle students, she is actually not the oldest person in Edelgard's group, as Hubert is 2 years older. Blue Lion time next, starting of course with their leader, Dimitri. The name of this signature hero's relic, the Lance Eredvar, and yes, it's pronounced like that, is of Irish origin and translates to slaughterer. Pretty fitting for his new owner, I would say. His retainer Dedue is actually the only retainer in the entire game who doesn't retreat, but instead just straight up dies whenever he's faced as an enemy. Hubert could learn a thing or two from that. Another crest fact coming up for Felix this time. He is the only student in the Officers Academy to naturally bear a major crest. The other two owners of one, Edelgard and Lysithea, did not exactly get theirs in a natural way. Next up is Ash Hubert, or at least that's his name in English, because he is the only character in Three Houses who has a different last name in Japanese, being Durand. No clue why this was changed, it's a name of French origin just like Sylvain, so it fits right in. And speak of the devil, Sylvain has the ability to use a hero's relic, like many other units. However, he is the only normal student whose relic is optional to obtain. The 4 others this applies to are the House Leaders and Byleth. Small step from Sylvain to the ladies of the Blue Lions, starting with Mercedes. She's 22 years old, making her the oldest known student at the Officers Academy in the base game. She's older than Byleth even. Unused dialogue for the Azure Moon route reveals Annette was originally going to appear as an enemy. She would have sided with Cornelia out of loyalty to her family, but would presumably be recruitable after defeat. Felix was actually supposed to appear as an enemy as well. And then finally there's Ingrid, who is the only student in the game who does not have any paired endings with characters of the same gender. Time to head to Leicester for the Golden Deer, where we once again start with their leader, Claude. He is truly brought to life by his great voice actor Joe Seja, but he actually auditioned for several other characters as well. Dedue, Dimitri and Ferdinand all could have sounded like Claude does now. Similarly to Annette earlier, unused dialogue for Lawrence also reveals he was supposed to appear as an enemy in Verdant Wind. He would have aligned with the Empire, which is a move he also pulls in Azure Moon and Silver Snow. A bit of a sad fact next, as several popularity polls since the release of Three Houses have consistently shown Raphael is one of, if not the least liked student in the game. Polls don't say everything of course, but that he's no Dorothea is fair to say I think. Ignatz doesn't fare much better, which has undoubtedly influenced his fact of the day. After all, he was the last of the game's students to be included in Fire Emblem Heroes. A stark contrast to Lysithea, the first non-lord of the game to win a Choose Your Legends ballot. But that's not my fact about her. Instead, I want to focus on her food tastes, because no one in the game has more disliked meals than her. A grand total of 20. On to Marianne, who I'm honestly kinda surprised hasn't become a bit of a forgotten character. After all, she's the only student in the game who doesn't appear post-time skip if she isn't recruited, meaning there will have been plenty of playthroughs out there where she barely made any impact whatsoever. Someone who's a lot harder to forget I'd say is Hilda. As you probably know, she's the only retainer in the game who can be recruited to a different house. But did you also know she's the only character in the game who requires Axe proficiency to join? Well, now you do. And finally for this house we have Leonie. To the surprise of absolutely no one, her post-time skip appearance is inspired by Gerald. The same applies to her look in Free Hopes. And then we get to the 4 members of the 4th house, the Ashen Wolves. As you may know, their leader Yuri goes by a fake name, and his real name is not confirmed. We do know it starts with Reg, thanks to Free Hopes, which has led many to believe his name is actually Regulus, which is Latin for prince. It's also one of the brightest stars in the night sky, and known as the Heart of the Lion, which could be a reference to his origins as a blue lion. On to Happy, who is the anti-Lysithea really, as she has the most liked dishes in the game, 21. Honestly, a little surprising. I would have guessed for Raphael to hold this title, or maybe Dimitri since he can't taste it anyway. Next up is Constance, whose 2 personalities lead to her being the character with the most victory quotes in the history of Fire Emblem. In total, she has 24 different lines, so 12 per personality. And finally, there's Balthus, whose hero's relic is a bit of a unique case. The Vajra Mushti are believed to be the only ones created by man instead of the goddess, but yet they function exactly like their legit counterparts. They have even previously turned a crestless user into a demonic beast. They're also the only relic that are gauntlets, and as a result have 2 crest stones on them instead of the usual 1. That's all 4 houses done, but there are still plenty of characters left to cover, most of which aligned with the Church of Seiros or the Officers Academy. The first we're gonna cover for this group is the Archbishop Rhea. She is the only character in Fire Emblem history who can achieve C, B and A supports while not being playable herself, all with Byleth of course. On to her second in command, Sedith. As is perhaps befitting of a man of his sternness, it is impossible to celebrate his birthday in the game, due to it being 1 day after Chapter 9's mission. He is the only playable character in the entire game this applies to. And when you're talking Sedith, Flayn is an easy follow-up, so she's next. Depending on the route you pick, you may end up fighting her on the battlefield, and if you do, you may see her use some attacks she cannot learn when playable. As an enemy, she has access to both Seraphim and Abraxas, but both are not in her playable spell pool. Let's take another step down the ladder and tackle the faculty of the Officers Academy, starting with the main character, Byleth. They don't hold that role in Free Hopes though, but do appear in the game with a pretty noteworthy taste in food. Of the 32 dishes in the game, Byleth likes 28, and the other 4 they don't even dislike. Not a picky eater at all, apparently. On to Manuela, whose B support with Sylvain has the questionable honor of being the only support conversation in series history where the characters don't interact at all. She of course also has a bit of a friendly rivalry going on with her fellow instructor Hanneman, and this is also shown when looking at the duo's strong points. Hanneman is good at bows, reason and horseback, while Manuela's are swords, faith, flying, so the exact opposite. Next up is Yuritsa, for who I am once again pulling out an S support fact. His special artwork is the only one to not take place at the monastery. Instead, he and Byleth are facing off against foes in Shambhala, the underground city of those who sliver in the dark. On to someone else who knows a thing or two about underground cities, Elfrig. Since he is playable as a mission assistant, he is the only playable character that possesses the skill Commander in the game. This is normally an enemy exclusive skill that reduces the effect of gambits and nullifies a number of secondary effects. The next category we're tackling are the Knights of Seiros, beginning with the youngest of the bunch, Cyril. It is revealed in a support with Lysithea that he is illiterate, which explains why all his notes in the advice box are all drawings. Next is the only non-playable character of this section, Gerald. There is however evidence to suggest the Bladebreaker was planned to be playable, as leftover data for growth rates, victory quotes and academy stats exists, as well as an affection rate that can be raised. But in the final game, we are left with his buddy Eloise, who was next on my list. It's said in game that he's bad at magic, which shows with his weak point being reason. However, his faith is perfectly fine. This may be a nod to him being a follower of the church, as the only faculty members that have poor faith are the non-believers Cyril and Shamir. And the latter is the focus of the next fact. Did you know Shamir's favorite character of game director Genki Yokota? Man, that's good taste. It's a small step from Shamir to Catherine, so she's up now. Despite being nicknamed Thunder Catherine, her reason magic is actually fire themed instead of thunder. And finally, for this section at least, we have Gilbert, Annette's father. He is the oldest playable character in the game, with a pretty big lead too. After the time skip, he is 61, although you would never guess it looking at his S-support art. And then we come to the final section, a complete grab bag of random, relevant characters from the game for who I still have interesting facts in the tank. Like the only playable character still missing in this video, Anna. That said, she does hold a weird place in your army. Not only can she not support with anyone, not even Byleth, she also is the only playable character in the game that never appears as an enemy. Sophis may not be playable, but she is still very important to the story of the game. However, just like Gerald, she also appears to have once been playable or at least battleable. She has a fully functional battle model, critical cut-ins, and even unique battle dialogue. Next on my list is one of FreeHouse's surprise success stories, the Gatekeeper. The fact he can be considered a character nowadays means he has become a first for many things in Fire Emblem history. He's the only unnamed character to ever win a Choose Your Legends ballot, as well as the only one that's based on a generic design, Soldier in his case. He was also given cameo roles in Constance and Byleth's S support and hers and Balthus C supports, which is very rare. We'll move on to a duo of trusty 8s next, and up first is Judith, the first NPC character in history to possess the Lord class. The second is Rodrigue, who has a weird inconsistency going on between his dialogue and equipment. The Fraldarius bloodline is often referred to as the Shield of Fargus, and in his battle in Crimson Flower, he literally calls himself the King's Shield. Despite this, he doesn't actually use a shield in battle, something he does do in Azure Moon, whenever he appears as an allied unit. Weird decision. Next, a little section devoted to the true villains of the game, those who sliver in the dark. Or the Agarthans, as is probably a more objective name to call them. Let's start at the top and work our way down, meaning we begin with Thales. He's in a select group of main antagonists of their game who do not appear at all in the final chapter. Instead, Thales is faced in the penultimate chapter, or not at all. His underling Solon is also part of a small group, albeit a completely different one. He's one of the few characters to appear in a Super Smash Bros. Reveal trailer who is not in the game themselves. In fact, his role in the trailer is pretty major, much bigger than the other characters this applies to, which are a few Animal Crossing villagers and Emperor Niall and Aegon from Xenoblade. Next is Cornelia, who is another character going by a fake name. Her real name is Cleobulus, which fits much better with her fellow Agarthans, as their names are all inspired by Greek culture. Cornelia means nothing in that regard, but Cleobulus is an ancient Greek sage. As such, Cronya's name also comes from Greece, as it's based on the Greek god Cronus and the holiday associated with him, Cronia. And in the final spot of this video, we find the character that also holds that role in Verdant Wind, Nemesis. The enormous scars on his body are one of the pillars of his design, yet their origin is never explained in-game, because the art book for the game actually reveals they were the results of battles with the dragons of Nabatea. And with that, I have truly run out of facts for today. If you knew all of these, kudos to you. And a side eye. I'm not sure if I believe you. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel to stay updated on all my future Fire Emblem content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.